I'll go ahead and share my screen. Thank you, everybody, for being here. Good to see you all. I'm Laura Marler. I'm Director of the Office of Postdoc Services in OITE, and we're going to talk about career planning for uncertain times, which is definitely what we are in. To start out with, I don't have the chat on so that you don't have to have it pinging you forever, but maybe use the Q&A and just hop in. What's your impression of the job market right now? Tell me something you think about the job market right now in the Q&A. Let's see. Uncertain, very competitive. Yeah. So I'm seeing some comments that, obviously I'm selecting in a way because you all came to my talk. So you're probably thinking things like that. It looks like there are very few positions, unpredictable. Yeah, that somebody said things are looking bleak. I think that this is the common conception right now. And so part of the reason that I wanted to do this talk is because we we're living in this moment. You all are living in this moment. You're looking at the job market in this moment, and hearing those messages can be incredibly challenging. And knowing, okay, I got to get applications out there. What is this going to look like? Job job searches are difficult even in the worst of times, even in the best of times. They're always a challenge, and there's always uncertainty that's part of it, right? But right now, there's uncertainty coming from a lot of directions, and so I want to start out by talking about hope first. To do an effective job search, you have to be able to balance hope and reality. You need both. You need enough understanding of reality to really accurately understand the market so that you can make good decisions. And you need enough hope that you maintain, first of all, your well being, and secondly, your motivation to keep going. You need to be able to be hopeful enough to keep sending applications. So you really need both things. And the benefits of having that hope are that you have an openness to possibilities. You're able to maintain some optimism. And the benefits of having that reality piece is that you're grounded in the now and pragmatism. You understand the constraints that are out there, right? And if you lean too far one way, if you lean too far towards hope, that can result in naivety and idealism, right? I don't want any of you to leave this talk saying everything's fine. I don't even have to worry about it, right? That's not the goal. But if you lean too far towards reality, then you risk shutting down and falling into pessimism. And I also don't want anybody to leave this talk saying, what's the point of trying? It's too hard out there, right? And so to mount an effective job search, or to plan effectively for your career, you have to have both. You have to be able to understand the reality, and you have to be able to maintain hope. So I love this quote. Actually, if you have time to look at this entire article by David Feldman, who wrote Super Survivors, about people who have been through, incredible difficulties or medical issues. There's this recent article, "Hope is not optimism," and this quote: "True hope takes a hard look at reality and then makes a plan." And so this is what we're going to talk about today. The goal of this talk is to take that hard look at reality and figure out what is the market really like right now, and then have some tips and suggestions to make a good plan in light of that. Okay, so what is the current climate then? Well, you all know, you're seeing the news the same as I am. There are policy changes that are affecting the job market, things like tariffs and immigration and funding. There is an AI boom right now. The economy is going through a lot of uncertainty, right? We still have inflation and high interest rates that are making it expensive to borrow. There's a kind of a general softening of the economy, and that's creating a lot of uncertainty. And then we're also seeing organizational change. We're seeing some right sizing of organizations that maybe overhired coming out of the pandemic. So we are seeing layoffs in some areas. We're seeing consolidation of some industries and elimination of duplicative roles. And then we're also seeing influences from tech and automation and customer self-service. And we're seeing that location matters. So let's dive into, this is probably what you're seeing in the headlines, right? So let's dive into some of what the real data looks like. This is monthly job creation in the US. So this is the hiring, right? In June 2025. Now, this looks honestly a lot brighter than what I suspect many of you are thinking, because this will show you that things have been actually pretty flat through the past year or so. If you look at June 2024, you actually see hiring was a little higher in June 2025. Um, you do see it coming down from that post-pandemic high. And so I think what's important to recognize is that when we look at it in the last few years, we're seeing coming down from that correction after the pandemic. And this is what you all are living, right? Because many of you in your research groups have seen people moving on into positions during this time when a lot of hiring was happening to make up for hiring that didn't happen during the pandemic. But if you zoom out to look at 10 years, what you'll see is that, okay, so here's the COVID pandemic, you can really see it. And then there's this correction afterwards with a lot of hiring in 2021 and 2022, and you see that coming back down. We're back at baseline. We're maybe a little under baseline right now, but I think the average for 2019 was 166K, right? And we're at 147K in June. And so a lot of I think the angst that people are feeling about hiring is not yet materializing in the actual hiring numbers. Same thing with layoffs. We're hearing a lot about layoffs. And I think part of the reason that that feels like, oh my gosh, there are tons of layoffs right now, is that we've all recently seen all-time lows for layoffs because companies were trying to make up for hiring that couldn't happen during the pandemic. But this dotted line is the pre-pandemic all-time low for layoffs. And you'll see that that's basically right where we are right now, is just essentially back to baseline. Now, these are general US hiring trends from the Bureau of Labor Statistics. So nothing I've talked about so far is specific to the life sciences. And so that's what we're going to do. Basically, this is the game plan for the talk. We will look at some data on career outcomes for NIH postdocs and then look at the current state of the job market based on sector within life sciences. And then talk a little bit about, okay, so if that's true, what do you do to be a competitive candidate right now? And how can you take care of yourself along the way? How are you going to maintain that hope? So where do NIH postdocs go? Well, this is data from some of our alumni, and this is a little bit old now, but this data was consistent over 12 years. So looking at 1,500 postdocs in this analysis, what we see is that around 35% of our postdocs go to academia, something like 20% are going to faculty positions, and then 24% to government, 15% to industry, 14% other, and then we have some, primarily teaching, about 6% and 6% clinical. This is pretty close to national data. Well, the big difference is that a lot more of our NIH postdocs traditionally go to government. So usually this industry slice would be larger, and you can understand that because it's where we are. So then what is the current state of job hunting? This is as of last month. We kind of dove into looking at national data sources from AAMC, from the Chronicle of Higher Ed, from Science and Nature, GeneCoda, just kind of combing through what is out there. If you look at nonprofits, jobs are there, hiring is happening, but it is more competitive than usual. And so what we are seeing is that it's a difficult time to make a jump to nonprofits. And it's really important to recognize that it depends where the money is coming from. And so when you think about nonprofits, first of all, it's not a monolith. And secondly, you have to understand where that money is coming from, because if it is federal money, it's going to be subject to a lot of the pressures that we're seeing in government. If it is memberships that are paying for that, then that's largely going to depend on whether people continue to pay those memberships, right? Versus, is it philanthropy? How is the general economy going to impact philanthropy? Is it investments? So just kind of understanding, where is that money coming from? And then I've given you a few um, links here for some good sites that are specific to searching for nonprofit jobs. HRA, this is a listserv you can join to hear about jobs. And then Idealist is great for nonprofit. And ASAE, this is the Association for uh, Association Executives, I think, right? So this is like all your professional societies, and their Career HQ is helpful, and they have a great job listing as well. Um, Government, as you know, you're all here. Government is frozen. We don't know when government hiring will thaw. And we also, this is important, we also don't know how robust government hiring will be when it does thaw. The current prediction is potentially a 1 to 4 hiring trend. We don't know what that's going to look like, and we don't know when it's going to happen. And so I think the really important point here is that, especially for all of you who are here and have seen government hiring over time and have maybe thought, oh, that's a path I might want to look at. It is not, it wouldn't be responsible of me to tell you that you can let your whole plan be government hiring thawing, right? Like, you can't currently rely on, especially if you're near the end of your time at NIH. I don't want your whole plan to be, I'll get a job when the hiring freeze ends. It's not something you can plan for, because we don't know when it's going to happen. And so if you're feeling like that's you, then come talk to me, talk to one of our career counselors about how to have some options and think about other options for you. But I talk to people pretty commonly who say, oh, I'm in my 6th year, but I'm going to get a research fellow position when the hiring freeze ends, or I'm going to get a staff scientist position in my lab when the hiring freeze ends. And that right now is not enough of a plan if your time at NIH is coming to a close. So let's talk about that if that's you. But that said, government hiring will thaw eventually. And if working in the government is a goal of yours, you want to keep an eye on that, right? Don't let it be your whole plan, but that doesn't mean say never, it's never going to happen, because it will eventually thaw. Thinking about industry, so if we look at life science sector postings over the last couple of years, this follows the trend that I just showed for the general hiring market, right? Things were definitely up post-pandemic. You see this peak in the second quarter of 2022, and then they have come down. But the fact that they've come down doesn't mean that they've come down to zero. This is still, in the first quarter of 2025, over 300,000 jobs. And so I think that's important to understand, that when we talk about things cooling off, again, it's going back near what was the pre-pandemic baseline, and it's not zero. And so that's an important component of this. We are seeing that industry compensation has been pretty much flat from last year. And so you can see for, markets that we analyzed for here in Maryland, like around 110 to 120. And for more competitive or more expensive markets like Boston and the Bay Area, we see a little bit more. The trend has been that negotiations are harder and are tighter right now, favoring the company. And so what that means is, it doesn't mean don't negotiate. You should absolutely negotiate. It means that you need to be prepared, both for the negotiations and for the possibility that you may not be able to get as far in negotiations as you might in a different market. The skills that employers want haven't changed that much, but these are things that it's important to understand as you think about how to make yourself the most competitive in this market. And so what we've seen is that employers are looking for, yes, of course, they're looking for your science, but if you look at job ads, you're going to see a lot of these words: communication, problem solving, teamwork, motivation. logical thinking, ability to work under pressure, time management. These are things that you want to be thinking about. These are your transferable skills. How can I take what I've done in an academic or a government research environment and translate that in a way that industry employers can understand, to demonstrate that I already, not just that I say I'm dependable, but that I have demonstrated that over time. One that we have seen added is autonomy. And so as you're making that resume and thinking about transitioning to industry, this is what you want to be focusing on. What are people asking for in job ads? So, where are you going to find those job ads for industry? That looks like company websites, LinkedIn, of course, Glassdoor, Indeed. You can use Simply Hired, BioPharm Guy. For positions in Europe, we've seen that Lab Biotech is good. And then huge, huge, huge for industry. It's for anything, but even more for industry, networking and informational interviews. Because we are seeing a lot of applications per posting, networking is going to be even more important than usual. And so, really thinking about that. We'll talk a little bit more about networking in a few minutes. And then we have a lot of videos on preparing for industry research careers. Also, this fall, we will have a series on preparing for industry careers, and we will have an industry job search group. So look out for all of that. You can use these videos for more specifics about industry. I'm going to talk a little bit about what we're seeing in the faculty market right now. So the reality is that we really don't know what's going to happen in the coming faculty cycle yet. It's still really early in the academic cycle. We are seeing that more of our trainees are doing international searches, and we're also seeing some data that indicate, and anecdotal data that indicate that smaller schools and state-funded schools, so especially those kind of like the state schools that aren't the flagship, are having more robust hiring this year. There are potentially places to look, but it's really early, and so it's very difficult to say anything right now. But what I will say is that there's this cool site showing data at Faculty Job Market Collab that is going to be a good resource as we go forward in the cycle to see how things are developing. We are seeing that DEIA statements are in flux. Schools aren't asking for them as much. Some schools are asking for something else instead. And so the actual contents of your faculty package may look a little different. And what we saw in spring in the last cycle was that there was more time pressure to actually hire, to close deals, and startups were lower. So the startup packages were a little bit lower than they have been. And so these are things to keep in mind. And when I say we're early in the cycle, this is what I mean. This is from Kim Jobber. So this is specific to chemistry jobs, but this is the same trend as what we see across, life sciences. And so these are posted job postings for faculty positions in multiple years. You can see the purple here is the pandemic, and you can see the impact of it. So in a typical year, you see faculty positions starting to be posted. The postings really pick up in late August and through September and October. This inflection point is actually November 20th. So, kind of throughout the fall is when you're seeing those postings come up. And we're still out here in July. So, it's really early. And that's the reason we can't say a lot yet. So, if you're looking now and you're not seeing anything, that's normal. It's just that we haven't really gotten into the cycle when those postings would be coming up yet. The other thing to consider is because there's so much uncertainty right now, it is possible that we may see this curve shifted to the right. So we may actually see a delay in when those postings come up as schools try to wait to gain more information. Of course, don't know for sure what's going to happen, but that is a possibility. So don't don't panic if you're not seeing things now, and don't panic if you're not seeing things kind of in this range in case it is a delay. Some common myths about faculty offers are that you will hear people say, oh, you have to bring your own money. Oh, you have to have a Cell Nature or Science paper. And so this is some data from that faculty job market collab that I shared, showing basically, looking at, did people who got faculty offers have Cell, Nature, or Science publications? And so you can see the purple here is people who received a faculty offer. And so of those who received a faculty offer, 33% had a Cell, Nature, or Science paper, and 67% did not. Right. So it's definitely not you must have to get an offer. And for transition to independence, this is a K-99 type award. Of those who got a faculty offer, 42% had some sort of early career award and 49% didn't. And so you can see, yeah, it helps. It is certainly is nice, but it isn't a requirement. Now, this year, we don't know, right? It may look like more people are bringing their own funding, but that's something to keep an eye on. In terms of navigating the academic market, it's really important to understand the breadth of universities and colleges that exist in the US. If you're in the US market, it really, wherever you want to look in that market, understand what's out there and what's available. And you want to be open to opportunities. And what I mean by that is, if you are thinking about a faculty position, you may immediately think about kind of what we would call R1, like the big research universities. In Maryland, that would be Johns Hopkins, the University of Maryland. Those are not the only options, though. And so be aware of, okay, what are the smaller schools that are still doing research? For our market, that would be UMBC. What are the schools that offer masters and maybe have some research? Things like Towson. So think about that. And then what's your openness to teaching? And are you interested in primarily undergraduate universities where you might have a lab, which would be primarily made up of undergrads, and you might be spending more of your time teaching? Or are you even open to entirely teaching positions, right? And then you might look at primarily undergraduate universities, you might look at community colleges. And so just thinking about what's that breadth of possible opportunities, and then what am I open to within that? Make sure you understand when and how to apply. If you are on the faculty market this cycle and you're not in our faculty job search group, it is huge this year. So I don't know that I can say, oh, everybody come, but everybody come to the big sessions at least, right? Let me know if you are interested and we can make sure that you're hearing that information. We are also going to have a series on applying in the academic market that starts in September. Make sure you're writing quality applications and having lots of people read them. This is true for any sector. Really, it's true for any sector. It's just that for the academic market, you're writing more, you're writing your research plan. Remember your audience. Remember that, first of all, it's a general audience. So they aren't all, your whole committee isn't going to be in your field. And also, they are reading so many of these, and they're reading them outside of their normal workday, right? And so be kind. Remember that you're writing this to a harried committee member who's seen 12 other applications tonight and doesn't necessarily know your field in depth. And make sure you're tailoring each application to really think about what each school wants. And so then there's this career readiness assessment. This is from somebody who gave us some feedback about what they're actually seeing in the searches. So I'll leave that for you. This is what one NIH postdoc on the academic job cycle in 2023, 2024 looked like. So this particular person, he sent 40 applications. He had 18 rejected. He was ghosted for 14. And a couple of those he did interview before either being rejected or ghosted. Of 12 interviews, he went to 8 and he had 5 offers and then accepted. He's now at the University of Virginia. So this is just a picture of kind of what you might expect in terms of the quantity of rejection and the quantity of applications that you are probably going to want to think about. In terms of finding academic job postings, journals are a great source. science careers, nature careers. Professional societies are another great place to look. Institution job boards. Use your networks here too. Sometimes we think networking is only for industry, but it's not the case. Make sure you're asking good questions. Future PI Slack is a great resource, but for job ads, but also for how's it looking? What are people seeing? And then these last two are, I would say, some of the best spots. So Chronicle of Higher Education and Higher Ed Jobs. And then, similar to what I shared for industry, these are some videos that you can watch on how to apply for academic careers and interviewing for faculty positions. So I'll talk more at the end about OITE resources, but for any of these, make sure you're using your OITE resources. Okay, so that is kind of what's already out there. Um, Things are changing really quickly though, and I think it's been difficult to understand what the market is really doing right now. And so we in OITE reached out to some of our NIH alums who are prior career symposium speakers just to get a sense of, um, what are you actually seeing? What is it really like in your sector right now? And so these are, like I said, these are prior career symposium speakers. So they're typically a little further ahead in their careers, often people who might be responsible for hiring, and they're kind of across all sectors. So this is the sector breakdown, you know, of those 94, so roughly 100, kind of almost a third in government, sorry, almost a third in academia, almost a third in industry, and then some in nonprofit and government and other. I think I saw other was largely consulting, but whatever they self-selected. Um, and of those, when we asked, is your organization currently hiring for entry-level PhD roles? This is what we got. For academia, so of the 33 in academia, something like 25 said, yes, we're currently hiring. Of those 32 in industry, maybe 18 said, yes, we're currently hiring. And you can see government, I should point out, government here is not just federal. This is including state and local government. So there is some hiring at the state and local levels. So including government, nonprofit, and then other. So what this says is, even though we're hearing it's such a tough market, that doesn't mean hiring isn't happening. In every sector, some hiring is happening. Academia and industry, a fair bit of these organizations said, yeah, we're hiring entry-level PhD roles. And when we asked them, well, what kind of roles are you hiring for? In academia, we heard we're hiring for academic positions, faculty, professors, and postdocs. And some did say faculty positions are frozen, but most of our respondents said, yeah, overall roles are still open. In industry, we heard people saying we're hiring for kind of across the board for engineers, scientists, sales, program managers, etc. Most roles are still hiring, but they might be limited or on an as needed basis. In other words, they're seeing hiring maybe slow, but continue. Government, many roles are frozen, as you know. In nonprofit, there were some postdoc level positions, some science educator or research manager, but roles were pretty limited. So still hiring, but limited. And then the other kind of piece of this is, okay, hiring is happening, job postings are out there, but we're hearing that there are so many applications per posting that the market is flooded. And so we tried to get at that by asking, have layoffs affected your local market? So this is kind of the location breakdown by region, right? And when we looked at, you know, have layoffs affected the local market? We saw that it was most true, or the most people said yes, it has in the Mid Atlantic and the Northeast, and we saw fewer effects elsewhere in the country. So not as much in the South or the Pacific or Southwest, Midwest, not as much. So that is kind of promising, as I think for those of us who are in Bethesda, we're kind of soaking up um, the current situation in DC, in the DC area, but what's happening in the Mid-Atlantic is not necessarily representative of what's happening in the whole country. And so this was good to see that that might mean, as we think about options, one question you may need to ask yourself is, am I willing to look nationally? Do I want to be in some of these other areas where the market may not be as flooded? And then we asked, what's your advice for someone on the job market now? And you can see the number one word we got back was network. Networking, gaining public speaking and writing skills. Think about how to adapt your skills and learn new skills to go the direction you want to go, diversifying your skill set and authentically networking. Make sure you understand the field, the role, and how you fit in. And I liked this one a lot. It's a tough market, but not an impossible one. Network, network, network. Okay, so we're going to talk about networking in just a minute. Before that, I want to talk about, so what do you do with all that uncertainty? How do you prepare for that level of uncertainty? One thing is to think about lateral moves and what does that look like in science, right? So um, if you were considering for whatever sector, whatever role you're considering, what are some other lateral options that you could think about? Um, really thinking about multiple options so that you are making sure that you're broadening your search. And that could mean, like we just talked about, broadening geographically, right? It could mean broadening to looking internationally. It could mean broadening in terms of the types of roles that you're thinking about. When we talked about faculty positions, it could mean broadening to think about other universities. There was somebody who responded to my inquiry saying, I'm at a university in Nebraska and we struggle to get people to come here, right? And so there are those cases where there are locations and sectors or types of schools or types of organizations where there are still lots of opportunity. And so thinking about how do I broaden to include those? And then embrace a squiggly path. Not very many career paths are linear. And so make sure that you are thinking about, what you want, what your long-term goals are, but be open to some creative ways of moving towards that. What are the other options that are out there? Make sure you leverage your network. It's going to be so important in any sector. And then think about quality applications versus quantity. This doesn't mean that you can totally limit the quantity. It is sometimes still a numbers game, but you want to make sure that you're really tailoring each application so that when somebody who is overworked, who's seen too many of these, who has, and I didn't say that, we asked as well how many, what are the application numbers that you're seeing? And most common answer was 50 to 100 of qualified applicants. And so when you're trying to come to the top of a pool like that, your application has to be tailored to that specific position. You have to take the time to understand what the job ad is asking for. What do they really want? What is this specific position looking for? And then how can I show that my experience meets that within really like the first half of the first page? How do I get them to know that right away? And how do I explain that really cogently in a cover letter? And so having quality applications matters. And then you have to take care of yourself. I'm not going to say this right now because I'm going to talk about this more in a minute. So, okay, I told you, and several of the respondents told you many times, network. So what does that mean? What are the best places to network? Everybody, I'm going to take a second because I have to plug in my computer. Everybody put in the Q&A, what is your kind of your first impression? What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think about networking? All right. So I'm seeing actually a little more positive than I see sometimes, but o- often people come to the idea of networking with some real hesitancy, some real sometimes it feels a little dirty or it feels usury or it just feels really uncomfortable to network. And I think part of that comes from the fact that we often think about networking as something that only happens in a conference room at a meeting, that only happens at a specific networking event. Or we think of it as just sending cold LinkedIn invites, right? Um, but actually, the best way to network is to form real connections, real relationships with people. And so that means thinking about how to do that as you meet people in the real world. So actually asking the people that you already know, oh, hey, I'm really interested in doing this. Do you know somebody in that field? Right? Asking your collaborators, asking the people you work with, asking your neighbors, asking your friends, do you know somebody who's doing this thing? And then, meeting with speakers after seminars and conferences, not just at the networking event, but think about all the places you bump into people, taking advantage of those moments when you get to talk to somebody. And part of that is having an elevator pitch ready, knowing what you actually want to tell them about yourself and what you're looking for. It also means being a good listener and asking good questions in those moments. And networking events are part of that. And then also community and educational events, things that you do outside of science, those connections still count. And informational interviews are huge for this. So, informational interviews, I'm going to tell you about a whole talk about informational interviews that you can listen to. But informational interviews are basically asking somebody for 20 minutes of their time so you can learn more about either their career, what's it like to do this, or their specific organization, what's it like to work here, or it could even be what's hiring like right now. Um, but at being able to ask those good questions. It is not a time to ask for a job, right? And so then I said, like, with all of this networking, listening is so important. And so keeping the conversation going, oh, that's interesting. Tell me more about that. What's the best part about whatever? Or what do you like least about what you're doing? How'd you get into this? What's your biggest challenge? Thinking about those kinds of conversations that or questions that keep conversation moving. When you do informational interviews, you're going to think about it in four topics. The present, tell me about your current position. Tell me about what you're doing now. The past, how did you get into this field? The future, what do you see as the opportunities in this field? It says long term here, but it can be long term and short term. It just can't be, hey, can you get me a job right now? Right? That's not what the informational interview is for. And then advice, right? And that can be feedback. What do you think I should be working on? What kind of skills do I need to develop? And then this one is really important. Who else should I talk to? Right? Because that way you suddenly leverage their network as part of your network. Oh, let me put you in touch with so and so. You're interested in that? I know somebody who's working on that. All right. I want to acknowledge that all of this is hard. It's hard for a lot of reasons. It's hard because it takes a ton of time, because applying for jobs is a full time job. So making each application match the job ad, like I just talked about, takes time. And finding those job ads that are a good fit for you takes time. And you still have a job during all of that. That makes it hard. It also can be really disheartening. You don't have a ton of information about the process. You don't know what's happening once you submit your application, especially online applications. It feels like a black hole. And then people ghost you, right? I mean, you saw the faculty search that I just shared where, whatever, 14 applications were ghosted from the beginning. But people get ghosted after interviews too, right? And this can feel like really personal when you already met them and talked to them. I'll share that my husband got ghosted after a fifth interview with a company. Fifth interview. And so be aware that this is as as much as I don't like it, as much as I wish they would just say, "Oh, sorry, we decided to move forward with someone else," this is a reality of the job market right now, that ghosting has become really common even after you're into the interview process. And so all of this can be really disheartening and it can be difficult to not take personally. Another thing that makes it really hard is that it's super high stakes because you need a job. You you need somewhere to land at the end of it. And for some of you, your visa depends on having that job. For some of you, it might be the first time you've applied for a real job. And for many of us, I think, especially in science, our identity is tied up in our ability to get that job and to succeed in whatever we think success is. And to be able to follow our chosen career path. And all of that makes this really difficult. And so I want to make sure that you all are thinking about how to build resilience, because another reality of any job search at any time is that there is always way more rejection than there is acceptance. You only need one yes, right? In the end of this, you are going to take one job, one yes, and a ton of no's. No's that come in the form of an email, no's that come in the form of talking to somebody, no's that come in the form of just never hearing from them again. It's a lot of rejection to do a job search. And so you want to build your resilience to be able to manage that as you go forward. Okay, so what does that mean in terms of actual tips? Start early. Now, I want to first recognize that not everybody who's listening to this probably has unlimited time left. But if you can, start early. The average job search, based on pre 2025 data, takes 6 to 9 months, right? And right now, we know it's a difficult market. So you know it's going to take longer. So plan for a year. If you have the space, plan for 2 years and use the first year to build your network and make sure you know what you want to do and that you understand the market. So if you have time, start really early with those pieces and think about starting to actually apply at least 6 to 9 months, but maybe even think about a year before you want to be leaving NIH. If you're closer than that, that's okay. That doesn't mean it's time to panic. It just means it's time to move and really think about what are the steps that can help me move through this. Make sure you network with everyone, right? Not just those in positions of power, because people who are going to be your peers are really important too. So think about ways to network and leverage your network. Tailor your documents, and not just tailor them for the job ad, but tailor them for computer filters. Think about the AI filters that the companies are going to be using. Jobscan.co can help with this. It's something to keep in mind. And then be a perfectionist about your job search documents. Tiny errors can weed you out, especially in a market where people are getting 100 plus postings per or 100 plus applications per posting. Any tiny error could be the reason that you don't move forward. So make sure that you're really perfectionistic about rereading and checking. But don't be a perfectionist when it comes to choosing which jobs you want to apply for. So if you're kind of 60 to 70% match on qualifications, apply for it. Now, as you get into the market, you're going to see where you're getting responses, right? And it's okay to adjust to that and say, oh, well, I think I stretched too far on these because I never heard anything. So, but over here, I'm getting better response. You'll learn that. But don't talk yourself out of something, especially at the beginning when you have no data yet. You don't need to tell yourself no, right? You let them tell you no. So apply, just send the application. Always follow up with a thank you note, right? Every person you do an informational interview with, every person you network with, every person you have an interview with, always follow up with a thank you note within 24 hours. Honestly, I would do it right after. Just make sure that you're maintaining that professionalism. And then have an online presence. LinkedIn is a powerful job search tool. This is really true. It's a great place to connect with recruiters, make yourself visible to recruiters on LinkedIn, even if you don't want open to work visible to everybody, make it visible to recruiters when you're searching, and make sure that you are maintaining your LinkedIn presence, that things are up to date, that it looks the way you want your future employers to see it. Exude professional confidence. An employer is going to pick up on your doubt or insecurity. And so some of this is, yes, you have to fake it for the interview, but some of it is take a second, as you're writing your job documents and as you're writing what you've accomplished, soak in that for a minute. because you need to believe it too. And it's true. All of you are here. You are all accomplished scientists. And so make sure that you are believing that as you go into the job search process. Don't take rejections personally, right? It is kind of a numbers game. And if you think about you don't know who else is applying. And if you are one of 100 qualified applicants, there's no way that it can be personally about you, right? And so there is an element of this that's a little bit of a numbers game. You want your application to be the best it could possibly be. You want to leverage your network as much as possible, and then you need to play the numbers game. So as far as that goes, you have to be able to keep yourself moving. And so do something small every day, right? You It's easy, especially in kind of, I would say, at the end of the first round or when you're a couple of months in, and it can start to wear on you, right? "Ugh, I'm not hearing anything. I'm not hearing anything. I'm just sending these into the void and I don't know what's happening." That can be really challenging. And so you want to focus on what you can control. And this, I'm going to fully acknowledge this is cheesy, but one way of doing that is to use something physical like paper clips, binder clips, and kind of tell yourself, I'm going to do 10 job search actions today, right? You set whatever goal works for you, and then you move them over one by one. Okay, I submitted an application. I reached out to somebody that I want to network with. I did an informational interview. I sent a follow up, just like that, right? So you kind of have that physical representation of what you've gotten done, because a lot like your research, a lot like doing an experiment, you control the process, but you don't control the outcome. And that can feel really difficult. But knowing that you control the process and that the outcome will come eventually as long as you keep doing the process, you can create ways to make those small goals for yourself each day. So the most important part of this is take care of yourself. This is a long process and it's a tough process. From that same article that I started with, I'll come back to hope. When people believe a goal that they care about is possible to achieve, they're more likely to take steps to make it happen, right? And so it's not that hope is magic. It's not like, I hope this is going to happen, and so it's going to happen, right? But when you believe that you can get there, you are much more likely to motivate yourself to keep taking the steps to get there. And so this is kind of the difference between hope and anxiety. Anxiety tells us bad things are coming and there's nothing I can do about it. There's no way to stop them. And hope tells us even when challenges occur, I'm going to be able to handle them and still achieve the goals that are most important to me. Right. And so I know it's easy to say and hard to maintain, but you want to be able to maintain that hope so that you can keep moving forward. And so you can think about three components of hope: having meaningful goals, having pathways to move toward those goals, and having agency, right? And so for you all in the job search, that meaningful goal is whatever your career goal is, right? You know where you want to land and what you want that to look like. Maybe you don't know yet. That's okay too. Then the first goal is figuring it out. But you know what direction you want to go. Okay, so then how do I find pathways to move toward those goals? That could look like smaller goals for my networking, smaller goals for applying, smaller goals that I'm going to meet with a career counselor to talk about my job documents. Having those little goals in place to create a path to get there. And then your agency, the fact that that's the paper clips, right? I don't control the outcome, but I control that I did these 10 actions today. So when you're feeling hopeless, come back to this. What's my goal? How do I get there? And what do I actually control right now? And then take care of yourself. And that means building resilience. If you are already in a job search, you need resilience. But if you aren't yet, you need to start building resilience early so that you have it for that, right? And it's not just for your job search. You need resilience because your papers are going to come back with an awful reviewer number two, because grant applications aren't going to get funded for many reasons, because experiments never work sometimes. For many reasons in science, we need resilience. So think about building resilience. And within that, that means setting realistic goals, celebrating small wins when they come. And I'm going to take a second to say something about celebrating small wins. That means, yeah, I moved the paper clips today, small win, I'm going to celebrate. It also means celebrating the kind of more um, outcome based wins. But when you do that, don't let yourself fall into the trap of tying your self-worth to those, right? So I sometimes, I think I'm already telling you, don't tie your self-worth, don't take it personally that you aren't getting a response or that somebody's ghosting you, but don't do it the other way either, because it can lead to a real roller coaster. If you get that first little win of like, I got an interview, this is awesome. Yes, celebrate that. But if you then tie your self-worth to that interview, it's too early, right? You don't have the job. And that can sink you. That can create this like, oh, every interview now is a roller coaster. So celebrate without tying yourself to just that. And then watch for burnout, because like I said, this is a long process. So know what burnout looks like for you. Know when you start to disengage, when you start to feel like you don't want to do it, when you're getting tons of resistance, or you're feeling really tired. Sometimes for some people it's more physical. Whatever that is, be on the lookout for those signs of burnout within yourself. And take a break when you need to, right? I think because this is so high stakes, and because we feel like I have to find the job, I have to find the job, it can be really hard to disengage and take a break. But you have to do that sometimes. So be willing to take a break when you need to, and then focus on what you can control. Do things that help you recharge. And that means that some part of your day every day has to be not only my research and my job search. Even though, like I said, that's you're doing those two full-time jobs. You gotta have something else though, something that helps you recharge, some time to take a break, and then connect with others. And I mean a few different things by this. I mean, connect with your friends and family so that you get, out of that sometimes, but also connect with other job seekers. Connect with people that you meet in the chat here. Connect with, if you're in the industry job search group or the faculty job search group, connect with the people in those groups, because it can make a huge difference to have people around you who are going through the same thing. And use your resources. So, a little bit about well-being resources in OITE. We have well-being advisors who are available to talk with you. You can email them confidentially at OITE-wellness. We have drop-in groups for things like application stress and dealing with rejection. A lot of, regular mindfulness meditation, Thriving Thursdays, where they talk about a well-being topic, journaling for career development, as well as 4-week skills groups and support groups. So there are lots of resources there for you. Use those resources when you need them, and even use them before you need them, so that you maintain your well-being throughout this process. If you let yourself get really burned out and let yourself get really discouraged by the state of the market, it's going to make it much more difficult to move forward, and ultimately much more difficult to find a job. So make sure that you're taking care of yourself. And then also use the Career Services Center. So within OITE, we have career counselors who can help you with everything from, I don't really know what I want to do next, I just need some help exploring options, to I know exactly what I want to do next, and I'd like you to help me get my CV or my resume or my cover letter really ready. To, can I do a practice interview with you? Can I talk about negotiations? Everything along that route. And so use the career services that are available. Okay, and then I have some more resources there. So I'm going to stop sharing and hopefully take a few questions. Thanks for sticking with me. That was a lot of me talking. All right. Um, so somebody asked, and Emily, if you saw awesome ones, you can unmute too. Um, Somebody asked, can I comment on etiquette around asking if somebody would be willing to refer me for an open position in industry? Yeah, this is one of kind of like networking. I think this is one of those things that we feel really hesitant about. I will tell you what changed my thinking on this question is when I learned that people within industry get referral bonuses. They actually get money to refer somebody who ends up getting hired because they want good talent. And so in some ways maybe you're doing that person a favor. So I would frame it that way for yourself. If it feels icky or you're really hesitant, it's okay to ask. If you know them or have met them, that's pretty easy. If it's a cold ask, I would probably say find a way to talk with them first, unless it's like a friend of a friend says, "Oh, hey, I know this person." You might want to speak with them before you just kind of like if you're just writing people randomly on LinkedIn, you're not going to get a lot of traction with that. So find some connection to them or do an informational interview. Don't ask them in the informational interview, talk with them, and then build your network so that you can use that later. As far as asking mentors if they can put you in contact with someone they know. Okay, I think that was a clarification maybe. Oh, somebody had a good question about differences between US citizens and non-citizens applying for positions. I just last month I did a talk on applying internationally, and so if you're looking internationally, go back and look at that one or let me know if you want the recording. But it is true. I'm not going to go in depth in this because it gets really complex. But my advice, if you're looking for a for somebody to sponsor a visa, is talk to them about it early. If they haven't said something in the posting itself, talk with them early because you don't want to waste a ton of your time going down your time and their time going down the route and going through multiple interviews when they're actually not gonna sponsor you, right? Um, H visas in industry are very difficult to get. I'm not seeing them. I didn't share the data here, but I also asked the previous career symposium speakers about visas, and I got a fair bit of no and a fair bit of yes, but in really specific circumstances where, it's we really needed that person. I didn't get a lot of general yes. So I do think it's challenging right now. And I can't go into all the details of that right now, but if you're in that situation, you have questions, you can reach out to me. You can reach out to DIS. They're, even the better people to ask those kinds of questions to. Um, yeah, but I will say in industry where H-1Bs are capped, it's very difficult to move from a J to an H in industry right now.
Laura, I have
Yeah.
one in the chat that I like a lot. Someone writes, it would be ideal to have multiple people read over every job application, but job postings are closing within a couple days of being posted because of how many applicants there are. How do
Yeah.
we manage quality versus time to ensure we don't miss the opportunity to apply?
Yeah, it's a great question. And you're absolutely right. There are a lot of applicants applying, and because of that, jobs are closing quickly. I would say, if you're filtering by when jobs were posted, filter for the last week, filter for the last 5 days, right? Don't waste your time on something that's been open a long time because things are closing really fast. So you're right. What that means is that you don't have a ton of time to perfect an individual one. I would not necessarily come to an appointment with a career counselor with like, this is the perfect posting for me. Help me fix everything about this one. I would come more with here's a representative or here are a couple of representative postings. Help me learn how to tailor this well, right? Because what you ultimately want because you have to do a balancing act. You need to send a lot of applications. You need to be pumping out applications to a certain degree. It's a numbers game, and you need those applications to be quality, right? And so when I say pumping out, I mean, this is going to vary for all of you and for your comfort and for your field and for your other obligations. But I will say when I was on the market, 1 to 2 applications a day felt like a lot to me. Felt like a lot. So see what you can what works for you. But you need to be able to manage the numbers and balance that with making them really personalized. And so what that tends to mean is that you're going to need some templates that you change pieces of, right? So you are personalizing it, but you're not necessarily you can't start from scratch every time. You should not start from scratch every time. A lot of times in a resume, like an industry resume, what that means is that people will have a summary of relevant qualifications at the top and they change that every time, and everything else might not change that much. In a cover letter, that might mean that the first and last paragraphs change a substantial amount, and the middle paragraphs that are more about you don't change. But figure out a system for that. That's something that you need, is to be able to kind of um, have templates that you can then s- tailor more quickly. It still takes time, but more quickly than starting from scratch. Yeah. And so when you go to that appointment, then what you're asking for is help me learn how to do that. Help me learn how to have the good template and then tailor well. Right. Let's see. Does OIT have resources for interview skills? Yes. What a great question. Thank you for asking. I didn't plant that, I promise. Yes, we have a workshop on interview skills that will run this fall. It's also recorded on our YouTube channel, so you can find it there. And we have an interview skills worksheet, which Emily might be able to pop in. Um, and you can also do mock interviews with career counselors. So yes, absolutely. Is it a good idea to do a second postdoc? This is a very personal question. A great question. It depends what your goals are. It depends what your CV looks like. It depends um, what you're finding and what kind of traction you're getting on the market. I will say that a postdoc can take a while to find, depending on what's going on in academia. I do see people move quickly to a second postdoc sometimes, and sometimes it takes some time. So if that is an option that you're considering, make sure that you're thinking about the time scale. This is something I should have actually probably talked about more. Some of the options out there work on different timescales than others. And so if you're thinking about a faculty position, you need pretty much you need a year to go through a whole faculty cycle. And if you're thinking about industry, it takes time to find that position, but when you find it, you could move very quickly. And so you kind of need to, as you think about your options, you need to make sure that the timelines align in a way that makes sense. And what I mean by that is you can't say, I'm going to look for an industry job, and then if I don't find one, I'll look for a faculty job. You can't say that unless you have an extra year to do that faculty search. So you have to make sure that the timelines of the job searches match up with your actual timeline of your time at NIH. Um, so I didn't really answer your question because it is very personal. But if a second postdoc is something that you are considering or that you feel like you want to have as an option in case other things don't work out, it's something that takes some time to find, and so you may want to be looking for it concurrently so that you have that as an option when you get there. Best practices for using LinkedIn. We have a whole talk about that, and it is on our YouTube page. And also, the Visiting Fellows Committee did, sorry, the Visiting Fellows Committee did an Insight Forum on LinkedIn very recently, and they have a recording from that as well. So if you have trouble finding either of those things, reach out to me. I can help you out. But yeah, definitely lots of advice about LinkedIn. Yeah, somebody else asking about both industry and academia. It's tough. I mean, I'm not gonna tell you not to do it. I think that's a good question to ask with a career counselor who can look at your specific, your goals and your background. But if you do it, make sure you're thinking about the timelines and how they align, and about your bandwidth to be able to manage all of that as you go through the job search.